Trish Broersma has been working with horses and humans for over 30 years in her groundbreaking work with equine assisted activities of human development. Quote, she is a certified riding instructor and has directed therapeutic riding programs in San Antonio, Texas, and Ashland, Oregon. End quote. We dive deep into her story and the relationship that is developed, as well as the healing that occurs during assisted interactions with horses for people who suffer from PTSD and women who are healing from breast cancer in her nonprofit program, Riding Beyond. Hello, I'd like to welcome Trish to Quantum Messages. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Trish.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so
Thank you. So it's so interesting. So I just moved to Ashland and I learned about your work where I'm boarding my horse. And you seem to be a big legend here in the town, and I'm sure beyond as well. And those who are involved with horses and involved with your work, which is Riding Beyond, equine assisted activities of human development, have said amazing things about you. And I would love to hear, and we would love to hear more about what you do. So with that said, how did you get involved with equine assisted activities and human development?
well. It really just started when I was a kid, like many other girls. And I'm sure you were one of those who were just kind of horse crazy. And I just kind of thought it would be a hobby and maybe I'd live on a ranch, for the rest of my life. And I grew up in Oklahoma City.
Mhm.
So horses were pretty available to me, but my parents couldn't really afford to buy me a horse until I was around 14.
Mhm.
And but I and in my teenage years I just felt called to do medicine, to be a doctor. And in at the University of Michigan, where I was finishing my undergrad work and planning to go to medical school there, I expressed to others how the cutthroat attitude of the classes just didn't appeal to me.
Mhm.
And people said, well, medical school is even more like that. And I was like, what? It was very disillusioning because several people mentioned it. And probably if I'd been in another school, not the number two medical school in the nation, I
Mhm.
would have gotten a different perspective. But as it was, I stepped aside and from that, and I majored in English literature in graduate school, which ties into the work I do
Mhm.
because of my fascination with myth and story and the power of story.
Mhm.
And so, for 10 years, I had met my husband just before I started graduate school. We were married immediately after, and then we had 3 children. And so it was like 10 years uh, before I was getting back into horses, and I started teaching horseback riding, and I bought a horse. And I had told my husband, I said, someday I'm going to get back into horses. And he said, okay, sure, no problem.
Oh,
He
that's
had
so
no
kind
idea,
of him.
no idea what he had agreed to.
Yeah.
But the thing about it was that he realized he didn't have something with that kind of passion in his life. And it started a lot of soul searching on his part
Mhm.
that led him to a new career in international human development, or organizational development, which anyway, so I I was teaching writing,
Mhm.
and I had the 3 younger children and my family, but something was missing. I
Mhm.
knew something was missing. I loved everything I was doing, but something was missing.
Mhm.
And one day on the front page of the San Antonio newspaper, there was an article about therapeutic writing program that had been there for a couple of years. I'd never even heard of such a thing. I thought, what? What is this? Because I real recognized right then, the light bulb went off. Here's a way to combine my calling to be a doctor
Mhm.
with my calling to be with horses. I didn't quite state it that way, but that's what it was. And I didn't look back. I started bringing in students to my program, my teaching program, who had mild disabilities.
Mhm.
And I didn't really know. I'd not been around people with disabilities.
Mhm.
And they were always kept at a distance. in my life,
Mm-hmm.
in our society.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite that way anymore.
Right.
But right away, it was just like, I so connected with them. It was like their disabilities allowed their soul to show through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just immediately loved it. And so I established a therapeutic writing program within a year in San Antonio,
Mm-hmm.
the Satellite Center, which is still in operation. This was, 35 years ago.
What is it called?
The Satellite
Oh, okay.
satellite. It was originally a satellite, orbiting satellite
Right.
of the program that was there.
Mm-hmm.
But they that relationship started breaking down because the person who ran it wasn't really a horse person. There were a lot of things that many of us were questioning.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, we just changed it. We became independent. We incorporated as a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Saddle, Saddle.
Okay, SADD. Okay, I thought satellite. So,
Yeah,
okay, saddle.
Saddle Light,
Yeah.
and the logo was a horse jumping over the sun.
Oh, cool. That's creative.
With someone riding the horse.
Uh-huh.
And so anyway, I ran that program for a couple of years, and then my husband had finished his PhD, and it was time for us to move, and we
Mm-hmm.
ended up here in Ashland. And I really didn't want to run a program. I wanted to be doing the programs, teaching,
Mm-hmm.
which was what I loved doing. And but the Hope Equestrian Center here had actually closed a year and a half before, which I hadn't noticed. It took us a couple of years to actually move here. And when I got here, I'd already talked to them about working with them, but I hadn't stayed in touch,
Mm-hmm.
and hadn't realized that they had closed after 5 years of operation.
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of aghast and disappointed. And then I thought, well, I guess I really do know how to reopen the program. And so, I'll do it for a year or two. I'll be the director. But, 9 years later, I'm the director and the lead instructor. And we had like 80 or 90 students a week. And I just got burned out and I resigned.
So, what was the Hope program focusing on?
It is a traditional, it's back in well, it closed soon after I left because there were a number of things. But anyway, it's back in operation and it's stabilized. And it's a traditional therapeutic writing program that serves children, youth, and adults who have disabilities and special needs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during the time when I was at Hope, I was one of our board members was a young man who was a rancher, and he wanted us to work with teenagers because the horses had saved him from drugs.
Uh-huh.
He wanted us to work with teenagers, and I realized that even though we at that time we conceived ourselves as working with people with disabilities, and really at-risk teens didn't qualify as
Mm-hmm.
disabled, but they did have special needs. Okay. And that fit into our mission. And so I developed a program that was a summer program once a week for 3 months. And eventually we were working with residential treatment centers here
Mm-hmm.
locally, mostly because, these young people, teenagers from broken homes in general, just we couldn't expect them to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
they would, sometimes their whole family would move unexpectedly between 1 week and the next out of town, and it was just really hard to have a program that way. So we started working with the residential treatment centers,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, so we worked specifically with them for 5 years. By the time I resigned from Hope Equestrian, and at that time I had the opportunity. I had been presenting the program at national conferences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people would say, you should write a book about this. Your 1 hour presentation isn't enough. And I said, right, I'm working 60 hours a week. There's no way I'm going to write a book. But now I had time,
Mm-hmm.
and so I did. And I can say more about that book later. But so for a while, I was after leaving Hope, I continued working with teenagers because I had a grant for that. But then there was this recession. where all that kind of money dried up because it was going towards survival services,
Hmm.
which is something that's, in like more recently, the COVID and wildfires have created a somewhat similar situation.
Right. Like a surgence of PTSD for these kids and families. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, well, right. Frankly, I didn't think about it that way then, but that is the language I would apply now to it.
Okay.
At the time, it was just that I didn't have funding anymore to
Yeah.
work with these kids who really needed it. And, so I started teaching workshops where people paid. And I also went to Australia and England and
Hmm.
other places. And I wasn't really doing that much here locally.
Hmm.
And I thought I mean, I was doing a few things, but really minimal. And I wanted to be serving my local community.
Hmm.
And so, talking about quantum messages,
Yeah.
I was at a conference. I was presenting at a conference in Prescott, Arizona,
Hmm.
and I sat next to a woman at the opening address just for a few seconds. And she said, "I hope you'll come to my presentation." I said, "Yeah, you come to mine, good." And I get to it, and I don't think I even knew the topic because anyway, she had 7 years before been uh, in hospice due to her breast cancer treatment,
Hmm.
and it had put a hole in one of her lungs and damaged her heart, and
Hmm.
she was preparing to die.
Hmm.
And she said I picked up this book that I'd been putting off reading because these kind of books are usually kind of sentimental.
Hmm.
And she said the author of the book is somewhere here at the conference, and it was the book I had written a few years before.
It's great.
I said, "Hey, we've already met."
Yeah.
Anyway, but even more than that lovely little coincidence was that I was astonished
Hmm.
that years before, when I was running Hope Equestrian,
Hmm.
I'd had two close friends with stage 4 breast cancer
Hmm.
whom I had accompanied to their treatment. I saw firsthand, they were close friends, what they had gone through. And since then, one of them had survived for like 5, 6 years before she developed brain cancer. They said it was unrelated. And
Hmm.
then the other was a physician friend who had survived for another 10 years. And uh, her breast cancer had radically changed her medical practice to where
Hmm.
she was a consultant to people with cancer for other approaches.
Hmm.
And but so anyway, here I was sitting there thinking, you mean I could have helped them with the horses at Hope Equestrian? Hadn't even crossed my mind because it just
So
wasn't the
when did
approach. Yeah, go ahead.
when did that come to you? After talking to the woman sitting next to you because of her after her reading her book? Your
During
book?
the conference, it came during her presentation.
Oh,
She
okay.
was showing, not only did she talk about it, but we went out and saw how she did this with horses. And I thought,
Hmm.
it was right then I got this, again, that light bulb going on.
Yeah.
And I came back and gathered a few women at where I was boarding my horses and said, I want to try this with Mystic. She's small uh, but she does have a personality problem. Everybody said, "Oh, you can't do not Mystic.
Mhm.
She's the dominatrix of the barn. You got to choose one of the older horses, the calm ones." And I said, "Well, let's just give it a try." And sure enough, I climbed up on her back, bareback, and I immediately thought, well, she isn't that reliable, but but she was completely focused on me.
Mhm.
So I said, well, let's have a couple of others get up she doesn't know them.
Mhm.
Again, she was completely into it. And
Mhm.
so a few months later, here's another light
Quantum
bulb
message.
moment with one of our first clients
Mhm.
uh, who was afraid of horses. She was frail. She was in the middle of treatment, had
Mhm.
finished chemo and was going to start radiation, but she decided to take a month off.
Mhm.
And even though she's afraid of horses, she had an adventuresome spirit, wanted to try anything. And in
Mhm.
our first session, where the idea is for after getting acquainted with the other women, go get acquainted with the horse.
Right.
The idea of the horse is invite the horse's muzzle to touch your hand.
Mhm.
Well, Mystic was all for that, but she kept walking forward and started nuzzling this woman in her solar plexus. And,
Mhm.
and I'm like, I mean, rapidly and gently, like she was getting ready to bite or what. I mean, I couldn't figure it out. And I was just like, I'd never seen her do anything like that.
Hmm.
And why wasn't this woman stepping back?
Hmm.
And so after 30 seconds or so, I put my hand on her chest. She steps back, and this woman's just weeping. She's saying she went right to where my tumor is.
Mm.
She said, and the reason she didn't step away was that she felt this energy pouring into her from this horse, and she just wanted more of it.
Hmm.
I knew we were onto
Yeah.
something different than I had heard about at that conference. And
Yeah.
so the work has grown from there. We have 5 horses doing the work now.
Hmm.
And and it's just been one remarkable piece after another.
Hmm.
Because Mystic, she's half Arabian and half thoroughbred, and it's that Arabian side of her that's very expressive
Hmm.
and friendly and
Yeah.
communicative. And that actually puts some women off a bit. So some of the other horses are more kind of uh, Zen-like in their
Hmm.
presence, but very much communicating.
Hmm.
It's they've all these horses have been trained at Liberty mostly,
Hmm.
so that they have an encouragement to be expressive.
Can
Whereas,
you describe what liberty is to the audience?
yeah, so it's in some circles it's kind of advanced work with a horse where you turn them loose in
Hmm.
a large arena or something or round pen. But in the tradition that I learned about 15 years ago, it's what you start a horse with, and I started a 2-year-old with it, one of our horses' journey,
Hmm.
and it basically the horse is free to run off,
Hmm.
or and they have choice. You give the horse a lot more choice, and it puts the responsibility on our shoulders to become more communicative, and when their willingness to give us leadership, because that's really important for
Hmm.
safety, everyone's safety, that they have given us leadership, but we have given them a choice about that, and it opens up all kinds of remarkable learnings that
Hmm.
happen between us in terms of all kinds of things, which would I could spend a couple
Yeah.
hours. So
So in general, so you kind of morphed away from working with people with special needs, and then you went into working with women with breast cancer after that conference that you had experienced, communicating with this woman and that kind of that quantum connection between you two. And then so now it's morphed into writing beyond. Is this so are you talking about writing? It became writing beyond helping women with breast cancer and
right, we
connecting with horses.
some of us, some of my friends and I were brainstorming, and we came up with the name Writing Beyond. And at first, it was just a program I was offering for
Uh-huh.
about 2 or 3 years, and then I realized we really had to incorporate as a nonprofit if
Hmm.
we're going to really anchor ourselves in the community and enlist um, their involvement.
Hmm.
And I just I put it off as long as I could because I had started 2 nonprofits, and I mean, it's another full-time job, you
Yeah.
know? And so, but anyway, it's been good. And right. So, and more recently, we have expanded since the pandemic to people who have long COVID, and also the people who have suffered here in our community from the Almeda wildfire, which destroyed 2,500 homes and affected many more thousands of people's lives still to this day.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of post-traumatic stress with breast cancer survivors and thrivers.
Yeah.
And with in our community, we are recovering more slowly from those effects in our community than urban communities. And so we right away felt like we needed to respond to that.
Hmm.
And several years ago. And so we have expanded our audience, and we also have made a concerted effort to include marginalized population like the Hispanic and Native American
Hmm.
women in our community who just weren't being involved through the referrals from the hospitals and things like that. And
Hmm.
so that's how we've kind of grown.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a life, they claim it's a life-changing experience
Mm-hmm.
to be with a horse. And because part of what happens with post-traumatic stress is that you pull into yourself
Mm-hmm.
to protect yourself. In treatment, in breast cancer, in probably any cancer
Yeah.
treatment, that's a tendency. You have the support of your medical team,
Mm-hmm.
but their family's worried, and so you often just don't want to share the stress with them and their and friends too. And so when the treatment is over, um, like how do you reestablish that? How do you, first of all, regain your own intuitive sense for how to care for yourself rather than, letting your team tell you how to do it, your medical team.
Right.
But more important, how do you reestablish those intimate relationships?
Mm-hmm.
Your family and friends. And there's a lot of anxiety and fear
Mm-hmm.
about so many other things. And being around horses and a group of women who are sharing their stories and horses who are so eager
Mm-hmm.
uh, to be, communicating with you in their way. And they, in in the human history, in our human history that we carry with us, even if we're not a horse enthusiast, they've been a part of the human journey for 40,000 years.
Yeah.
And that has an effect. That has a quantum effect on
Yeah.
us. And in my mind, they are stepping into their most important role in human history today,
Mm-hmm.
which, they've in the past it was like workhorses, or
Yep.
the Pony Express transportation,
Or
warfare, a big one. We all know those, and but most recently it's sports and recreation. But in my mind, the work they are doing with us as we're all a part of the herd, part of the community together, that their role, if you will, is as an ambassador, inviting us to get more vitally connected with the natural world and ourselves because of climate concerns that are begging for us to recognize our kinship with the natural world,
yeah.
our kinship with horses, with all of all the sentient beings,
Yeah.
including the rocks and all of that, the natural world, so that we can more responsibly have a future as a
Yeah.
planet, and to me, that's their their most powerful role in history right now. And for women to recognize the value of the feminine presence in all of that, which has been so um, eclipsed by much more masculine endeavors for many hundreds, even a few thousand years. But there's plenty of prehistory around about the power of the feminine
Mm-hmm.
as, as a a vital force in leadership of communities. And that's, in some ways, breast cancer can be a gift to a woman to sort of wake up to their higher purpose.
Yeah.
And although I wouldn't say exactly that that's our mission with Writing Beyond, but it certainly is what happens. It's
Mm-hmm.
what happens that
So
they
are you observing that the horses are reminding people to tap into more of their authentic selves?
absolutely. Horses are extremely sensitive
Mm-hmm.
to the energetics of our state of mind, our state of being.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if I arrive preoccupied by a meeting or
Mm-hmm.
something upsetting, they'll just walk away from me. They say, "Forget it." Go,
Goodbye.
I've learned to say, "Okay, take a breath,
Yep.
become present." This is why they are great partners for psychotherapists.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that they pick up on, a dissonance, that
Mm-hmm.
what's going on inside of a person is often hidden, sometimes from them, that person themselves. And but when when you're authentically connected, even to your anger and your sorrow around a horse,
Mhm.
they'll come over and say, "Welcome," you
Mhm.
know, and they see a horse walking away from them. They say, "Oh, he doesn't like me," and it's always just like, well, let's just talk about how you're feeling inside,
Mhm.
and the minute they start turning inward and articulating what's going on inside, the horse will turn around and come back.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
it's just a powerful
Yeah.
uh, marker for authenticity, and
Very
that
interesting.
it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, so they really so they help you reflect on your internal self at that present moment and to really face yourself and what you're feeling in that moment.
Accept
Very
it.
interesting.
I mean, because they'll come and touch a person, just gently in
Hmm.
just the right place on their body, like on their shoulder, maybe their head or their
Hmm.
back. I don't know. They
Yeah.
choose. You, and and it's just, they're just astonished
Hmm.
at the appropriateness of this communication. And so
Right.
it's about learning to it's about learning literacy with body language, what
Hmm.
our bodies have to tell us,
Hmm.
because that's what it's all about with a horse is body
Right.
language and their extreme sensitivity to the
Hmm.
environment, which has allowed them to survive.
Right.
Uh, it, that we can have that same sensitivity,
Hmm.
and it gives us um, the ability to understand much more deeply not only ourselves but our communications with other people and what other people are offering.
Hmm.
We start picking up something a lot more than just what they're telling us. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And it makes sense because, the horse, I mean, if the horses don't have shoes on, then they're deeply connecting to the earth. So they're getting the messages from the earth. And
Yes,
what's very interesting is that so their spine, from head to tail is going in a horizontal direction and ours is going in a vertical direction.
that's
And then
interesting.
when we connect those two, it creates this like beautiful circular, field. So that's really fascinating what you're saying. I mean, I'm kind of like interested in what do you think's going on a deeper level between horse, human, and earth that we are not seeing, but we're sensing, we're feeling it. What do you think
My big
that connects?
thing that when we first started writing Beyond,
Hmm.
I was led to focus on the heart center of the chakras.
Hmm.
It's the chakra that's in the middle of our others. And a lot of the research validating the work we do has been done with war veterans with severe PTSD. And they, what the research is based on their coherent heart rhythms.
Hmm.
And the horse has a very coherent heart rhythm, and that's associated with states of calm and joy and peace.
Hmm.
And so, horses are also flight animals, so they'll panic and run, but then right away they're just resilient. Okay, 5 minutes later they're grazing and they're back to that coherent
Yeah.
heart rhythm. And veterans with PTSD do not have that characteristic on their electrocardiogram.
Hmm.
You can see it in real time with a veteran hooked up to the heart monitor, and the horse too. Horse has a heart monitor on, and within about 20 minutes of just being with the horse,
Hmm.
the two heart rhythms entrain with one another.
They sink.
The veteran takes on that coherent heart rhythm,
Hmm.
feel a sense of peace and joy that sometimes they haven't had for years.
Yeah.
And it takes repeated experiences for it to be long lasting, but
Right.
it becomes a reference point for them.
Right. It almost retrains the heart into remembering how to be coherent and connected. And that's
Exactly.
so fascinating because personally for me, when I hug my horse and I specifically put my heart kind of on her neck area and kind of, near her, I just feel this like my heart just opening up and it's just this like calming feeling. And that's what you're saying. It's the syncing of, the two heartbeats together. making
Yeah,
this
it's
coherent.
not exactly, I want to be clear, it's not the heartbeat because it's
Mhm.
coherent heart rhythm and the heart, the
Okay.
horse is much large, he has a larger heart, which
Uh-huh.
benefit
Right.
of that is that the energy field is bigger,
Bigger.
goes
Hmm.
out by like 60 feet
Hmm.
compared to ours, which goes out about 8 or 9 feet.
Hmm.
So it's not the
Itself
heart, it's
beat.
a particular aspect of the rhythm, you
Hmm.
know, that shows this coherence.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Fascinating. That's fascinating. So yeah, a very deep level of healing working with horses for sure. Um, Interestingly enough, you had mentioned earlier that you wrote a book called Writing into Your Mythic Life. Um, and you were going through a deep experience and kind of in a transition time, I believe, you know,
Mhm.
during that time. How does, did this deeper level that you were experiencing with the horse, how did that kind of transition into writing your book, writing into your mythic life?
Well, because I was a literature major, I was, and some other experiences, I had a deep fascination and love of literature of all kinds. And so a thread of the program I did with at-risk teens
Mm-hmm.
was showing them how they were living their own hero's journey. Okay. All those adolescent trials and tribulations.
Mm-hmm.
But right there on that's what makes good stories. It's right there part of and that they're actually a hero in their own journey in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And just revealing to them the larger patterns of their lives. It's kind of spiraling, which
Mm-hmm.
are mythic patterns.
Yeah.
So um so I was interested in sharing that in
Uh-huh.
and um and I expanded the work for more than just teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the book is written for anyone uh,
Mm-hmm.
who's got an interest in horses.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing was talking about quantum experiences. Okay. Um, just as the book was about to be published by New World Library, they sent me a printout of what the pages were going to look like. And it was right around Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
And I took it with me. I took the printout of it with me to my daughter's in-laws ranch
Mm-hmm.
in near Carson City, Nevada, for our Christmas gathering with the idea I was going to dedicate the manuscript there, the
Mm-hmm.
book. I was going to dedicate it there with those horses,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they were all for it. They like that sort of thing. Well, it turned out the day of Christmas when we were going to do it, it was a terrific windstorm. It was right at the base of a mountain. I can't imagine living there because they said, "Oh, yeah, this happens every now and then." With the wind just sweeps down off of the mountains, and it
Mm-hmm.
was, it was taking roofs off, and trash cans
Right.
were flying all over the place. And
Mm-hmm.
my little dog, we came out of the little cottage we were staying in. She goes rolling
Oh,
off. She was on a leash, fortunately.
whoops.
So anyway, they said, "Oh, we can't do that dedication." But I thought I'm just going to do it by myself because okay, so the gusts of wind would come about every 15 or 20 minutes. They sound
Mm-hmm.
like a freight train. If
Mm-hmm.
you've ever been around an intense storm, there's this roar that you hear arriving. So, anyways, the last roar, I start going out into uh, the fence line between the fields, and it's extended out for like 15 miles
Uh-huh.
in acre pastures with horses all over. And as I went out, I ripped the manuscript into little strips of paper and I threw it up to the wind because the wind was perpetual. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I just blow it out and I said, "This is for you. This book is for you." And I went out and I sent the whole thing out. I figured it's biodegradable.
Right.
And so um, so I felt like I dedicated the book. So a few months later, I get this email from a guy in Australia who tells me that he had been out camping on his motorcycle and that he'd had a dream of my name.
Huh.
And I'm like, okay, actually, the email was from his high school friend whom he had told about the dream. That's it,
Mhm.
Kim. and she says, my friend had this dream of your name, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, right, what are you selling?
Yeah.
You know, and, but I thought, well, it sounds innocent enough. I'll stay in touch with her. And um yeah, I mean, after a few days, I was like, the person I should be talking to about this is David, the guy who had the dream.
Yeah.
And so somehow we set up a time to talk, and I was a little worried that I wouldn't be able to understand him with his Aussie accent. But anyway, he told me that since he was a kid, he would have these experiences
Mm-hmm.
where he would just know something, and he said he really wasn't aware of it until he was about, I think he said about 11 years old,
Mm-hmm.
running into the house and into the backyard. And he told his mother the answer to a question that she was just getting ready to ask him. And it
Oh.
was the first realization that he had been doing that for years.
Mm-hmm.
And he started noticing all throughout high school how he just had this weird talent. Okay. But then when he got out of high school, he got married, he became a car mechanic, and he had kids. He said it just faded away because he didn't have time.
Right.
So recently, though, so he's in his 50s. He'd had an accident. I think he said a car had fallen on him or something.
Mm.
And so he was disabled, but he could ride his motorcycle. So, but he was on disability. He had all this time. And he said that this had started coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And that he had gotten my name in the dream, but it was such an odd name. It is Broersma. That he'd written it on a piece of paper and went back to sleep. And when he woke up, he'd totally forgotten about it until he came across the piece of paper.
Did he spell it correctly?
Evidently,
Wow.
because part of what he remembered was that he was supposed to tell Kim, this
Uh-huh.
high friend of his who lived 1,000 miles away, or maybe 2,000 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And so he called her, and she looked at my name and found out that I was into horses
Mm-hmm.
with my website. And she had in the previous few years had gotten 8 horses. She was new to horses, but she'd gotten 8 horses. So she was, that new thing, trying
Right.
to learn about it, and it was a lot. And so she, so we just kind of stayed in touch, and anyway, and then David, about 2 or 3 weeks after our first phone conversation, he says I think he called me or something. I mean, we were on FaceTime or something. He says, "You're not going to believe what just happened." And I said, "You're right. I'm sure I won't." And he was listening to the radio driving down the street, and it all goes staticky. He said that happens often,
Mm-hmm.
and he usually just turns it off. But this time he turned the dial and he heard a talk show going on,
Mm-hmm.
and it was real clear. So he left it there, and he said, "Trish, it was you talking." And I said, "No way." I said, "I didn't do any book interviews. Anyway, it was a whole year since I had done anything. And I
Mm-hmm.
certainly didn't do one in Australia, David."
Yeah.
And I finally said, "Well, what was I saying?" And he started
Yeah.
saying a few things. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds
Wow.
like something I would say. And I finally remembered that a whole year before I had done a book interview with Justine Toms for New Dimensions Radio. And
Mm-hmm.
she had said it would go international. And he happened to hear the one time that it was
Wow.
broadcast in Australia. And
Wow.
so did this other woman who contacted me the next day and said, "If you ever want to come to Australia, I like to organize conferences." And
So was the book published by this time?
yeah, it had been out for over a year.
Oh, okay, so it'd been out for over a year. So he had never knew about your book, but then prior to him getting a hold of you, your book was already published.
Yes, the book was
Okay.
already
So
published.
after you released all the papers.
Here's the other thing. He finally told me when it turned out I was going to go to Australia
Uh-huh.
the next year. He wrote up the dream. He wrote it up in more detail, and he said that a horse had told him in this dream my
Mm.
name. And wrote him back, says, "You never mentioned the horse, David." And he said, "Oh yeah, I know. I just thought that made me sound really weird." And I said, "No, David, that makes it make more sense for
Yeah.
me."
Like that would have helped. I would have understood more.
But it was like, I just, when he said that, I immediately went back to my tearing up that strip and throwing it out to the winds,
Hmm.
and carried it, the quantum message, all the way across around
Wow.
the side of the world to the horses. And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's a
The
playful.
horses spoke to each
Yeah,
other. The
yes,
horses spoke to each other through the quantum realm, and then he got that
exactly.
message.
Exactly.
That's
And
fascinating.
it was so obvious when I went there, Ani, that I was there at a particular moment in history
Uh-huh.
in Australia where they're part of the British, the United Kingdom.
Right.
And so you have the horse world in particular has a kind of British disciplined
Yeah.
style. But a lot of people were hearing about this new way of being with horses.
Hmm.
And they were just hungry for it to the point where they were in tears when I was talking. They were just I mean they just didn't know how to do it, and I went back 2 years later. It was clear that it had taken hold, not just from my being there, but it was just a historical unfolding that I was privileged to be a part of.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so um, that's kind of how my book um,
Came about.
has carried much of this work out. But I really, at the time of that writing of that book, had not, uh, I was not acquainted with what we're doing with writing beyond,
Hmm.
and I got to say, when I started realizing Mystic's talents, that I'd heard of horses, of course,
Hmm.
healing capabilities, but she had a terrible reputation. She was the reason I had her was that she was a great
Hmm.
endurance riding horse, great trail riding horse.
Hmm.
But she was a major PMS mare. Every 3 weeks she would be kind of ballistic. But it's like that all those hormones
Yep.
for this incredible connecting ability with
Yeah.
people. And once
Interesting.
I mean, she loves the work. She loves it. And uh,
Interesting. So, what do you feel is the this ancient archetypal connection between human and horse? How does that come out from your observations and also in your book? Because it's kind of like this, this deep ancient myth. We have this such a deep connection to these horses. I mean, they've, like I've said before, given up they've basically given up their freedom to be of service to us, all of these thousands of years. And
yeah,
so, what is this? You know, a lot of us, like personally for me, like I seek this, I seek horses out. I seek the natural world out. There's such a huge disconnect right now.
mhm.
And so when we're out there, we just feel so alive and, connected. So I'm just curious what you feel is this, this deep, ancient, this line that is connecting us, archetypally.
Well, I think yeah, this is a fun one to talk about. They're associated with us. First of all, we do have a responsibility to them for having brought us into their herd, so to speak.
Mhm.
Um, and it's their strong herd instinct that's making the difference. Um, that's allowing us to have this relationship with them that they willingly offer.
Mhm.
Okay. And um, so it started many, many thousands of years ago. And it's a part of just about any good story. There's a horse in it somewhere. Okay. They may not be a major player, but in some of them they are. There's Pegasus,
Mhm.
who's a major player. But I mean, they are a they provide an image of power, of beauty, of high sensitivity to what's going on around them. They provide mobility
Mhm.
for our ambitions moving forward. Okay. So whether we consciously recognize that or not, it's in our DNA, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know how you verify that. I'm a big one for research.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things we're talking about are
Hmm.
increasingly being validated by research. So, but on the on talking about things that haven't been validated by research yet,
Yeah.
it's that they are an incredible partner for us to have with us at our side, whether it's in reality, like you and I are fortunate to have horses.
Hmm.
It's just as powerful once you've developed your imaginal powers
Hmm.
of vividly uh, harnessing your imagination to
Hmm.
have a horse at your side as an archetypal partner.
Hmm.
Okay. And that's what, that first client that I mentioned, where she, you know, had that, mystic finding her tumor and all that. It was a life-changing moment for her. And the way she talked about it was that mystic became a permanent companion for
Hmm.
her. And part of her history was that in the previous year, which her husband was telling me recently, he feels was the initial reason for her developing breast cancer, that one of her adult daughters had died. And
Hmm.
she was just overwhelmed with grief.
Hmm.
And then she developed breast cancer. But she hadn't really been able to give expression to that grief.
Hmm.
She told us a few weeks into the program that Mystic would just come to her during moments of happiness, just throughout her day, because of these experiences she had had with her. And she said one day she felt herself descending into that depression, that dark place
Hmm.
that would come occasionally over her daughter's death. And for the first time, she was able to give expression to it, because she said, in that dark place, I suddenly saw the expressive eye of Mystic
Hmm.
holding me in her arms, so to speak.
Wow.
And she said she finally had that huge emotional release
Hmm.
that had been over a year and a half or more. It
Yeah.
held in abeyance. And she said it was huge. It was huge in her healing, uh, for her to be able to do that. It was an archetypal partnership that allowed that.
And it was a partnership in the seen and unseen realms too, because
Absolutely.
when she was in her deepest, darkest place, Mystic came to her, which is fascinating.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's deep, very deep work. Um, so I'm curious as we're kind of wrapping up, what do you think the primary lesson horses are trying to teach humans in our modern world right now?
I think it's it has to do with our kinship, as I mentioned before,
Hmm.
that we have not only just an undeniable kinship and responsibility
Hmm.
for the rest of the planet, uh, but that it is a very rich and dynamic and incredible relationship that's awaiting us. That's in some ways invisible, but incredibly potent.
Hmm.
Uh, and I was sharing with you some of the ways it's been showing up for me just recently,
Yeah.
and I think that trend, that your work is so on target,
Mhm.
Ani. I congratulate you.
Thank you.
And that horses are right up there with us,
Mhm.
cheering us on.
Yeah, it
And
gives me the chills when you talk about that because when you get those goosebumps, you just kind of start really tapping in, to that vibration.
yeah, the quantum messages, they're just
Yeah.
full of quantum messages.
Yeah, they are.
Relevant
Very.
ones, relevant ones.
I
And
know it's
you have to
so
own a horse. You don't even have to own a horse,
yeah.
I mean, it's nice to at least to have, right up the street from me, even though
Yeah.
I live in town, there's this one pasture that's grandfathered in.
Mhm.
There's horses on it. Everybody walks by, stops and says hi to the horse. It's just
Mhm.
It's just a block away from me here.
Wow.
And it is such a gift, I think,
It
to the
is.
people who don't have horses of their own.
Yeah, that is. And you're just doing such great work, and your story is so intriguing and so fascinating. And I love how you're tying in the deep emotional trauma work also with this whole mythic archetypal work coming and blending together with
Yeah.
the horses, with partnership, like you said, with the horses. And it's just so powerful. Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thank you for, all these years of doing your work and helping so many people and women, especially with breast cancer. And I don't know if you are going to be helping people with other cancers as well, but maybe later on that might come in. Who knows?
They are certainly welcome to come
Yeah.
and come to our Saturday program, which is for basically for the general public.
Hmm.
But in terms of my training,
Hmm.
I'm not. It would be a lot of time for me to learn about all the other cancers,
Right.
and so that's for our in-depth core program, which is 4 weeks, 3 hours once a week.
Hmm.
I'm uh, we won't be going into other cancers with that one, but we have expanded that core program to include people who are expressing stress from the wildfires,
Hmm.
long COVID, and so in that way we've expanded it. Yeah,
Hmm. That sounds very good.
yeah,
Where
other
can,
come
go
to the
ahead.
program.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, where can we find your work, and how can we support your mission in writing beyond?
Well, writingbeyond.org is our website, which is full of lots of videos. There's, in fact, an Emmy award-winning video on our homepage,
Hmm.
and opportunities to make financial contributions. We are supported by the community. Our core programs are offered free to survivors, um, and and so participation. We have a weekly meditation circle all year long with the
Hmm.
horses in the field, meditating with them.
Hmm.
And then the Saturday program is open to anyone. The meditation circle and the Saturday program are open to anyone who would like to participate in
Okay.
what we're doing.
Okay.
And yeah, and any we're always open to volunteers. We have a lot of volunteers. We have volunteer training in mid-March of every year. And then like sometimes we have one in August if we need, like we did this past August, we had another volunteer training
Hmm.
because we couldn't do this work without our volunteer ambassadors. So
Hmm.
those are some of the ways, we're always looking for ways to expand into the community.
And how about for those people that are not maybe like out of the country, or, living in another part of any other state or in the United States? How can they connect with your work and get involved, or where can they go if they're seeking assisted, equine assisted activities of human development?
Um, yes, there are actually more and more of those. I was really impressed this last spring. Um, we were accepted, I guess is what I want to say, into a fundraising program for Horses for Mental Health organization.
Hmm.
And there were over 80 programs around the country
Wow.
that work with horses for mental health purposes. And those are just the ones who were participating in that peer-to-peer fundraising. And so the Professional Association for Therapeutic Horsemanship, Path International, is our professional association that has a directory of people doing the kind of work I do, as well as other forms of therapeutic horsemanship. And they're a great resource. And so all over, it's really growing all over the world. Okay. There's also the Horses and Humans Research Foundation, hhrf.org, which is, I'm on a international committee with them for equine well-being.
Hmm.
And they are promoting these kinds of issues with horses
Hmm.
all over the world. Along with, there are others too. There's a huge sea change, if you will,
Hmm.
going on in the competitive world
Hmm.
with horse racing and issues at the Olympics,
Hmm.
where social licensing is finally bringing to public awareness
Hmm.
some of the ways that we have not been honoring these gifts that the horses offer us. And there's a there's a uprising, you might say, of we have to change the rules. We have to change this relationship that's based on, money
Right.
and competition. And so, there's lots of ways of doing that in any community, I'm sure.
Okay, well, Trish, you are doing such amazing work, and I just want to give you my heartfelt thanks for all the work you've done, and also for the horses, the horse partners that have been helping the humans as well. I really appreciate that, and I so enjoyed talking to you on the show.
It's been
Thank
a
you.
great pleasure, and I'm thrilled to see where you're going to go with all this and to
Thank you.
help wherever I can.
Thank you
Okay,
so much, Trish.
thank you.